Tell us what it's like to have a good family and friends you can rely on in a difficult situation. We lost everything in a single storm. With nothing but determination, love, and the support of family and friends, we fought to rebuild. I remember the exact moment my life shattered. It was just before dawn, the sky bruised in shades of gray and black, heavy with the threat of a storm that even the old farmers said they had never seen. I was sitting on the porch, a mug of lukewarm coffee in my hands, trying to ignore the rumble of the wind creeping through the trees. My farm, the one my grandfather had built from nothing, lay just beyond the hills, rolling fields of wheat and corn, the barn standing proud at its center. I never thought I would watch it all vanish. The first gust hit with a violent roar, snapping the old oak at the edge of the yard like a twig. I ran inside, but deep down I knew it wasn't just the trees that would fall tonight. There was a terror that no preparation could stop, a force that would test every ounce of my resolve. By the time the hurricane tore through our valley, the sky was a river of flying debris. Roofs ripped from their beams, fences uprooted, animals scattered in panic. I could only clutch my family, huddled in the cellar, as the wind screamed around us. When the storm finally passed, the silence was heavier than the roar. The dawn revealed a world unrecognizable. The farmhouse had lost one side of its roof. The barn doors lay splintered across the muddy ground, and the fields that once promised life, were a chaotic tangle of broken stalks and uprooted trees. I wandered through the wreckage, feeling both anger and despair clawing at my chest. How are we ever going to rebuild this? How can we face the months of work ahead? That morning, my phone buzzed. Messages from neighbors, friends, even distant relatives poured in. Are you okay? Do you need help? We're coming. It was overwhelming, but among the panic, a flicker of hope sparked. My father's voice cut through the haze. We rebuild. Together. Simple words, but they carried the weight of generations. The first to arrive were the neighbors. Old Mr. Jacobs, who had taught me to drive the tractor, showed up with his son and a truck full of tools. My cousin Anna, who had moved to the city years ago, pulled up in her SUV, her arms already full of bottled water and supplies. One by one, people who had shared our lives, our celebrations, our harvests, even our sorrows, arrived at our doorstep. We started small. The roof first, then the fences, then slowly the fields. Every nail hammered, every beam lifted, every seed planted was a declaration. We will not let this farm die. It was backbreaking work, and there were days when the sun felt like it was mocking us, scorching our hands and backs, making sweat sting our eyes. But there was laughter, too. Jokes in the dirt, shared meals under the battered barn. Moments where, even amid destruction, the strength of family and friendship shone brighter than the storm ever could. At night, as I lay under a blanket in the half-fixed house, I realized something important. The hurricane had destroyed our farm, yes, but it could never destroy the ties that bound us together. That night, I made a silent promise. Whatever it took, I would restore this farm, not just for myself, but for everyone who had stood by us when the world fell apart. I didn't yet know the challenges that still lay ahead. The market debts, the unpredictable weather, the slow recovery of the fields. It all seemed insurmountable. But with each sunrise, each helping hand, and each word of encouragement, the impossible started to feel a little more attainable. And so, with mud-stained boots and hearts full of determination, we began. The first week after the storm felt like wading through a nightmare with no end. Every step outside revealed new destruction, twisted metal, shattered windows, uprooted trees lying like fallen giants across the fields. The barn, which had once been the heart of our farm, looked like it had been reduced to a toy by some vengeful child. My father, usually a stoic man with calloused hands and an unwavering gaze, moved silently through the ruins, inspecting every broken piece as if he could somehow memorize what needed to be saved. I followed, carrying a toolbox that seemed far too small for the task ahead. We started with the animals. Some had escaped during the hurricane. Others had been injured, frightened beyond reason. My younger brother, Tom, with his hands shaking but his spirit unbroken, helped me gather the chickens and goats, coaxing them back into the makeshift pens we had managed to salvage. The cows, stubborn and confused, refused to move at first. I remember the moment when I finally managed to lead Daisy, our oldest cow, back in the stall, her eyes wide, trusting me despite everything that had happened. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental in the chaos surrounding us. The physical labor was exhausting, but it was the emotional toll that nearly broke me. Seeing my father, normally unshakable, pause on the hill overlooking the fields, his shoulders slumped under the weight of despair, made my chest tighten. I wanted to tell him it would all be okay, that we could fix this. But even as I said the words aloud, I wasn't entirely sure they were true. The farm wasn't just a collection of land and buildings. It was our history, our legacy. Every broken fence post, every flooded field felt like a piece of our past being swept away. Despite the challenges, the community's support never wavered. Neighbors arrived with chainsaws to clear fallen trees. Friends brought meals, and strangers offered equipment or labor. Each act of kindness became a thread, weaving us back together with a world we feared we had lost. I remember Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman from 2 miles down the road, showing up with a basket of pies. She said, "We may not control the storm, but we control how we rise after it." That line stayed with me. It became our mantra. Rebuilding the barn was the first major milestone. It took days just to clear the debris, each plank lifted feeling like a small rebellion against the destruction. Nails bent and splintered boards slowed us down, but every member of our family and every friend who came lent a hand. At one point, my cousin Anna and I were trying to hoist a heavy beam into place when it slipped, nearly crushing us. We laughed nervously afterward, the tension breaking in a shared moment of relief. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't easy, but it was progress. The fields, however, were a different story. Weeks of heavy rain after the storm had left the soil saturated, the crops drowned. Wheat that should have been golden and ready for harvest lay broken and rotten, corn stalks bent to the ground under the weight of the water. We spent long hours assessing the damage, calculating what could be saved and what had to be replanted. Each decision felt like a gamble. If we miscalculated, it could mean another season of loss. Yet, even in the face of uncertainty, we planted seeds again. Tiny, fragile kernels of life pushed into mud-soaked earth, a quiet testament to hope and perseverance. Sleep was scarce. Every night, I lay awake listening to the wind whisper through the gaps in the partially rebuilt roof, replaying the day's work in my mind. I would think about the bills piling up, the machinery that needed repairs, the market deadlines we couldn't miss. But then I would remember the hands that had helped me lift a beam, the voices that had cheered when we finally patched the roof, the smiles of neighbors who refused to let us give up. Those moments reminded me why we fought so hard, why every drop of sweat mattered. There were arguments, too. Stress has a way of fraying even the strongest bonds. My father and I clashed one afternoon over the order of repairs. My brother grew frustrated when the goats escaped for the 3rd time that morning. Anna and I argued over the best way to clear a field. But even in conflict, there was an underlying understanding. We were all fighting for the same thing. We were rebuilding not just a farm, but a future. By the end of the 2nd week, the barn stood upright once more, solid and proud. The roof of the farmhouse was patched enough to keep out the rain, and the fields, though battered, held the promise of new life. Standing on the hill that evening, looking out over the land, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in days. Possibility. The storm had tested us, pushed us to our limits, but it had not defeated us. We still had a long road ahead. Months of labor, uncertainty, and moments when it felt as though we might never recover. But we were no longer just surviving. We were rebuilding. Brick by brick, nail by nail, seed by seed, we were creating something stronger than before. And in that effort, in the shared struggle and unwavering support, we discovered a truth far greater than any disaster could destroy: the unbreakable power of family, friends, and the human spirit. And yet, as we celebrated the small victories, I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm had left a mark far deeper than the broken fences and lost crops. A mark that would challenge us in ways we had yet to imagine. The days blurred into one another, each morning grayer than the last, heavy with the threat of another storm. Though the barn now stood upright and the farmhouse roof patched, our work had only just begun. I had convinced myself that the worst was behind us, but Mother Nature has a way of reminding you that survival is never guaranteed. One morning, I woke to find the river at the edge of our property swollen beyond recognition. Weeks of rain after the hurricane had saturated the soil, turning fields into vast expanses of mud. Water seeped into the foundation of our newly repaired barn. My heart sank. We had just lifted the beams, hammered the nails, and patched the roof, and now, all that effort risked being washed away. I called my father, but he was already outside, boots caked in mud, shouting instructions at my younger brother who struggled to anchor sandbags along the riverbank. "We can't let it reach the barn," he yelled, his voice cutting through the wind. I grabbed a shovel, joined them, and we worked frantically, moving sandbags, digging trenches, and redirecting the water as best we could. It felt like fighting against an invisible opponent, one that shifted, surged, and refused to be tamed. Even with our efforts, the river claimed part of the northern field. The soil, once rich and ready for planting, was now a soupy, unusable mess. I felt a wave of despair, the kind that creeps quietly into your chest, making each breath heavier than the last. We had survived the hurricane, rebuilt the barn, and yet here we were, staring at another disaster, feeling powerless. Tensions among the family began to rise. My father, usually calm and methodical, grew irritable. He blamed himself for underestimating the river, for not reinforcing the bank sooner. "I should have seen this coming," he muttered under his breath as he stomped through the mud. My younger brother, Tom, who had been so eager to help, became withdrawn, frustrated at his perceived incompetence. Anna and I argued constantly over the best way to protect the remaining fields, our voices rising louder than the wind outside. But the challenges weren't just physical or logistical, they were emotional. Every night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if we were truly capable of recovering. I questioned my decisions, my leadership, my strength. Was I doing enough? Could I keep my family safe and the farm alive? And in those quiet moments, doubt threatened to overshadow hope. Then came a market setback. The local cooperative where we sold our produce informed us that much of our stock had been destroyed or delayed due to the floods. Payments we were counting on would be reduced or delayed indefinitely. It was a blow that threatened to undo months of hard work. I remember sitting in the kitchen, staring at the phone, feeling my hands tremble. The weight of responsibility felt unbearable. How could we recover if the support we depended on was slipping through our fingers? Yet, even in the face of these trials, moments of resilience emerged. Neighbors arrived again, unasked, bringing equipment, tools, and manpower. Some stayed for days, sleeping in makeshift tents, helping us reinforce the riverbanks and repair machinery damaged by the mud. Their presence reminded me that no farm or family survives alone. Together, we could fight the river, repair the fields, and rebuild our livelihoods. One night, after hours of backbreaking labor, I stood on the hill overlooking our property. The moonlight reflected on the muddy fields, making the water glisten like a silver mirror. My father joined me silently. He rested a hand on my shoulder and said, "We've faced worse storms, even if they weren't this literal. Remember, son, it's not about avoiding disasters. It's about how we rise after them." His words anchored me, reminding me that hope is often forged in struggle, not comfort. Despite our resilience, setbacks continued. Equipment broke under constant use. Mudslides blocked the pathways we had cleared, and unpredictable weather threatened newly planted crops. Each day became a test of endurance, patience, and creativity. I learned to improvise, using old tarps to cover waterlogged fields, repurposing damaged tools, and rotating our labor to conserve energy. Every small victory felt monumental. In those weeks, I also witnessed the true power of human connection. My cousin Anna stayed late into the evenings, organizing supplies, comforting Tom when frustration threatened to overwhelm him, and sharing moments of levity that reminded us of life beyond the mud and rain. Friends and neighbors became more than helpers. They became partners in our struggle, sharing both physical labor and emotional strength. Through it all, I realized that rebuilding the farm wasn't just about restoring what was lost. It was about forging something new. We learned to adapt, to anticipate challenges, to lean on each other in ways we hadn't before. The farm was no longer just land and buildings. It was a living testament to resilience, perseverance, and the enduring power of family and community. But deep down, I knew that the hardest challenges were yet to come. The hurricane had tested our limits. The river had threatened our progress. And now, as we planted seeds in mud-stained soil and patched battered barns, I understood that true recovery required more than strength. It required strategy, patience, and unwavering faith in each other. And so, with aching muscles, mud-covered boots, and hearts determined to endure, we pressed on, never knowing if the next sunrise would bring hope or hardship, but refusing to surrender to fear. The weeks had grown long, each day feeling like a battle fought against unseen forces. The river's anger had subsided, but the land still bore the scars of flooding. Fields that had once promised a bountiful harvest now appeared battered and lifeless, their soil cracked or waterlogged. And every morning, I woke with a heavy heart, wondering if our hard work had been in vain. One morning, I discovered that our tractor, the only one capable of plowing the stubborn fields, had broken down. The engine groaned, smoke curling from beneath the hood like a warning sign. My father cursed under his breath, his usually steady hands trembling as he inspected the damage. "Without it," he said, his voice low and strained, "we might not plant in time." That single thought sent a cold wave of panic through me. Time was running out. Crops needed planting, orders needed filling, and every delay now felt catastrophic. We scrambled to fix the tractor, but it was no easy task. Parts were scarce, money was tight, and even our neighbors, as generous as they had been, could only help so much. I spent nights poring over manuals, trying to diagnose the problem, my fingers stained with grease and my mind exhausted from calculations and frustration. The longer the tractor remained idle, the more our dreams of recovery seemed to slip through our hands. Meanwhile, tensions within the family had reached a boiling point. Tom, usually cheerful and willing, had grown distant and irritable. He blamed himself for minor mistakes, snapping at Anna and me over trivial matters. Anna, normally the voice of calm, began questioning every decision I made, her frustration spilling into arguments that left all of us exhausted. Even my father, stalwart and stoic, seemed to grow impatient, his eyes weary but determined, searching for any sign of progress. Then came the news that shook me to my core. A neighboring farm, one we had once helped during the hurricane, had been struck by a sudden infestation. Crops were ruined, livestock lost, and the family faced bankruptcy. It was a brutal reminder of how fragile life on a farm could be. I realized that our struggles were not isolated, that nature and circumstance did not choose their victims carefully, and that our resilience would be tested repeatedly. But in the midst of chaos, moments of clarity began to emerge. One evening, after another grueling day of trying to salvage what we could, I watched Anna and Tom working together, side by side, laughter breaking through the tension for the first time in weeks. I felt a surge of hope. Perhaps we had been so consumed by stress and fear that we had forgotten the strength we drew from each other. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. While scavenging through the storage shed for spare parts, I discovered a set of old tools my grandfather had kept. They were worn, rusty, but functional, passed down from generation to generation, a testament to ingenuity and perseverance. I realized that if we could repair the tractor with these tools, we might just save the planting season. I rallied the family, and for the next 3 days, we worked tirelessly, fueled by determination that burned brighter than fatigue or despair. The repair process was grueling. Bolts refused to budge, Engines spat smoke and sparks, and more than once, I felt the weight of failure pressing down on me. But each time frustration threatened to break me, I remembered my father's words. It's not about avoiding disasters. It's about how we rise after them. Slowly, methodically, we adjusted, tightened, and replaced, learning to improvise, to adapt, and to trust each other's judgment. Finally, on a crisp morning when the air was still heavy with the scent of damp earth, the tractor roared to life. Its engine growled with a defiant strength that mirrored our own resolve. A cheer erupted from the family, voices mingling with the wind as if celebrating not just a machine, but the collective strength of our perseverance. That day marked a turning point. With the tractor operational, we plowed the fields, planted seeds with precision, and even began repairing fences and barns that had suffered minor damage in the floods. Every action felt monumental. Every small victory became a building block for hope. Yet, recovery was never a straight path. Challenges remained. Unexpected rainstorms, equipment failures, and financial pressures loomed, but the fear that had once paralyzed us began to dissipate. We had survived the hurricane, battled floods, repaired machinery, and endured emotional strain. Each hardship had strengthened our bond, teaching us resilience, patience, and the importance of unity. One evening, I stood on the edge of the field, watching the sunset paint the horizon in fiery shades of orange and red. Anna rested her head on my shoulder, Tom kicked at the loose soil playfully, and my father leaned on the fence, his eyes scanning the fields with quiet pride. I realized that the farm was no longer merely a patch of land or a source of livelihood. It had become a symbol of perseverance, love, and unwavering commitment to family. For the first time since the hurricane, I allowed myself to dream again, not just of survival, but of growth. The farm would thrive, our bonds would deepen, and our community would stand stronger than ever. I understood now that every trial we faced had prepared us for this moment, the moment when hope and determination overcame despair. And yet, even as we celebrated small victories, I knew the final challenges awaited. The journey of restoration was not over, and the ultimate test of our resilience, resourcefulness, and unity was still ahead. But with every triumph, every repaired fence, every planted seed, I felt a deep, unshakable confidence. We could endure anything together. The farm, like our family, was rising from the ashes. And in that rising, we discovered not just survival, but the extraordinary power of unwavering hope, collective strength, and the unbreakable bonds that hold us together, even in the harshest storms. The air had grown warmer, tinged with the scent of freshly turned soil and blooming wildflowers. Morning sunlight poured across the fields like golden liquid, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that the worst had passed. But deep down, I knew that hope alone would not restore what had been lost. It was effort, unity, and unwavering dedication that had brought us this far. Days blurred into a rhythm of planting, repairing, and nurturing. Each seed we sowed became more than just a potential crop. It was a symbol of perseverance, a tangible testament to the trials we had overcome. My father, who had once been quietly stern, now walked the fields with a gentle pride in his eyes. He would pause often, examining the soil or checking the irrigation channels, and nod, satisfied with the progress. "You see," he said one evening, wiping sweat from his brow, "this is what hard work looks like when it's fueled by love and commitment." Anna, ever the heart of our family, organized the planting schedule, made meals for everyone, and kept morale high, even on days when exhaustion weighed heavily on us. Her laughter became our soundtrack, a rhythm that reminded us there was joy even in toil. Tom, whose temper had flared in the storm's aftermath, transformed into a quiet pillar of determination. He anticipated problems, fixed machinery before it broke, and offered encouragement that felt stronger than any pep talk. Together, we moved as a unit, each one of us aware that every action mattered, that every small victory contributed to the larger mission. The community that had once lent a hand now became a constant presence, their support unwavering. Neighbors came with tools, advice, and sometimes just company, reminding us that recovery was not a solitary journey. One afternoon, while repairing a section of fence, Mr. Hensley, an elderly farmer who had seen decades of storms, approached me. "You've done something remarkable here," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Not just saving crops, but saving the spirit of this place. The land responds to care and love, and you've given it both." His words, simple yet profound, struck me deeply. By midsummer, the farm had transformed. Fields that had been barren were now lush with green shoots, promising a harvest more bountiful than I dared to hope. Barns repaired, fences mended, irrigation flowing. Every corner of the property bore evidence of determination and teamwork. The hurricane, which had once seemed like the end of everything, now felt like a distant shadow, a reminder of our resilience rather than a harbinger of defeat. Yet, even amid triumph, life demanded humility. One evening, dark clouds gathered unexpectedly, and a heavy storm threatened to undo months of work. Rain pelted the windows, winds shook the trees, and the fields were at risk once more. My heart sank, but instead of succumbing to fear, I rallied the family. We secured the barns, tied down loose equipment, and reinforced vulnerable areas, working through the night in the howling wind. In those tense hours, I realized that recovery was not a single victory, but a continuous commitment. It was about showing up again and again, even when exhaustion begged us to stop. When the storm passed, the sun broke through the clouds, scattering rainbows across the fields. Though some crops had been battered, the damage was minimal compared to what we had endured before. Relief and triumph mingled, and I understood something crucial. Life on the farm, like life itself, was unpredictable, but together, we had the power to face it all. Harvest time arrived with a sense of celebration unlike anything I had ever experienced. Friends, neighbors, and family gathered to help gather the fruits of our labor. The fields, once drowned and desolate, now yielded corn, wheat, and vegetables that shone under the summer sun. Each basket we filled felt like a victory, a reminder of the storms we had survived, both external and within ourselves. As we worked, I reflected on the journey. It had not been the land alone that had been restored. It was our bonds, our trust, and our faith in one another. My father's pride, Anna's unwavering heart, Tom's steadfast dedication, and the community's kindness had all coalesced into something far greater than crops or buildings, a shared legacy of resilience. The final day of a harvest arrived with warmth in the air and laughter ringing across the fields. We sat together on the porch, hands dirty, faces sunburned, but hearts full. My father raised his glass, eyes glistening. "We did it," he said simply, "not just because of hard work, but because we did it together." In that moment, I realized that our farm had become more than just a place of labor. It was a living testament to the strength of family, the power of community, and the transformative magic of perseverance. The hurricane had tried to break us, floods had tested us, machinery had failed us, but none of it could extinguish the determination that flowed through us like lifeblood. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I walked through the fields alone. The soil was firm beneath my feet, the air was calm, and the soft hum of cicadas filled the silence. I felt a profound gratitude, a sense of completion that went beyond physical restoration. We had survived, we had rebuilt, and in doing so, we had discovered something eternal, the enduring strength of love, courage, and unity. The farm would continue to face challenges, storms, and the unpredictability of life. But now we were ready, not just to endure, but to thrive. Because together, we were unstoppable. The land had healed, our hearts had healed, and our story had become one of triumph. And as I looked over the fields, I knew that no matter what storms lay ahead, the bonds we had forged, the lessons we had learned, and the love that sustained us would carry us through always.